You're listening to the 49 Carats podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Wednesday, March 6th. And as always on a Wednesday, joining me today is Coach Dezi. Dezi, how you doing today?
Whew, it's been a wacky Wednesday, but I'm here.
Wacky Wednesday. I like that. But I like Wednesdays because it means like we're already halfway through the week, almost Friday. You got to love it. So, but today, Dezi, we're going to be talking about some free agents. Free agency is looming. It's coming like winter or like summer in this case. Summer's close to. It's a few days away. Kicks off Monday, I believe. And so for the 49ers, there's some talk that, they could be interested in making a, big splash signing. Mike Silver kind of hinted at it in one of his articles, in the past couple weeks. And so did Tim Kay from The Athletic. And really, it came from John Lynch when he was asked if the 49ers could make a splash signing. I guess he laughed like a maniac, and that gave people the impression that he might be cooking something. So that is exciting for this team. So we're going to talk about some of the free agents that the 49ers could potentially target. But first, Dezi, let's look back at 2023 free agency, because they did make a big splash with that as well. And it was Javon Hargrave from Philadelphia. And guess what? He was just named one of the 12 worst NFL free agent signings of 2023. Not only named as one of them, he was the top number one worst NFL free agent signing, per Gilberto Manzano from Sports Illustrated. So, I mean, it's just an opinion piece, but this doesn't seem too great, right? To have Hargrave is seen as a bad signing for the team.
Yeah, I'm not, but it's kind of what all of us fans think of, right? Like we just the way they were constructing the defensive line last year, like I was so hyped. I was so ready for it. I'm like, let's go. We are going to wreck things. And then it was like, and especially in that 3-game stretch of losses that we had, it was just like, come on, man. Like, why? So I was actually shocked by this, but then once I thought about it, I'm like, really, which one was worse? Like, what other worse signing was there? And number 2, I would say, was very close. Did you see number 2?
That is, to me, I don't. So number 2 was Jimmy Garoppolo to Las Vegas. Personally, and I'm not being biased at all, like, I think that was the worst one, because one, quarterback is so valuable to your team, and they put in a lot of money towards Jimmy Garoppolo, and lucky for them, the only reason that they had the flexibility to cut him was because of the suspension that he had for, I don't even know what it was. It was something that was prescribed to him apparently, but he landed on the conduct for thing whatever for suspension. So because of that, it was able to, I guess, waive some of the guarantees that he had. So it made it an easy cut for them. They'd probably still be stuck with him had it not been for that, suspension. I mean, it was probably the Raiders that tried to slip him something without him knowing, just so they could try to get out of it. So who knows? And they probably gave the league a call, like, hey, like we think you should check him out. We think you should do like a drug test, like today.
Exactly.
I'm just joking, but I do think that was the worst one. And Javon Hargrave, he's going to be with the 49ers next season. That already makes it better than the Jimmy Garoppolo free agent signing. And look, I'll say this about Hargrave. I think as a whole, you look at the defensive line, and I think they all underperformed relative to our expectations, right? Like we all had really high expectations, and part of the reason for that was because of Hargrave. You got Nick Bosa, you got Eric, like all the guys that they have on this line. And it just didn't work out that way. But I would say the entire defense, like I said, underperformed. It wasn't just Hargrave. And you know what I'm going to do, Desi? I'm going to chalk it up as it being a Steve Wilkes issue. And I'm going to go back to, having high expectations for this
defense. They're going to come for you
in 2024.
Come for you, Steph. They're going to come for you.
But do you not think that maybe Wilkes had some I don't know, contribution, I guess, to the 49ers defensive line, maybe not being as good as we thought they were going to be?
I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I can answer that, right? Like only the people behind the scenes are going to know that truthfully. But I think there was a time when Nick Bosa was on the podium after a game and he kind of alluded to like, they're used to playing this way and yet they're playing this way. And I think it was during that stretch, maybe after the Browns game, or maybe, I'm not sure if it was after that or Minnesota or which one, but that kind of was a little telling because Nick Bosa is not a man of many words. And so for him to say that and come out publicly and say that, I think it was kind of telling that, I don't think everybody was bought in. And so it may be interesting with that said, and talking about these free agencies that's coming up, Chase Young is still like a giant question mark to me. And I wish I had that answer because you wonder if someone like Sorensen coming in is going to be electric enough to like be the glue that molds them together and is able to kind of bring them up and be more of an exciting defensive line that we expected. But Chase comes with his own set of skeletons, so to speak, from Washington. And so you just kind of wonder, is it worth it? Do we keep him or let him go? And then like, how do we see this free agency going then? Because to me, I would rather draft an offensive lineman, left tackle or a right tackle, because that's harder to find in free agency, and look for some other options that are out there. I mean, there's some sexy options out there.
Yeah, I mean, and Chase is going to be one of the names that, we do talk about today because we'll look at some of the free agents that are available in positions of need for the 49ers. And Chase Young, he is going to be a free agent in a position of need for the 49ers. So they could elect to bring him back. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But Desi, there is so much going on as, free agency gets closer because a lot of teams in preparation for free agency, they want to be able to make their moves. There's some teams that are currently over the cap or close to being over the cap. So, they're starting to make some moves so that they could have flexibility at the start of free agency. So we're seeing a lot of new names of players, that are getting released. And we're also seeing some names of guys that are being franchise tagged, some names that a lot of us hoped would, reach free agency. And ultimately, because the team had the option to franchise tag them, they will not be. So I want to talk about those names first, because for me, it's a big bummer. And you know what? This cycle, this offseason has taught me I don't like the franchise tag. I want Brian Burns, gosh damn it. I want Josh Allen, the edge rusher, but the quarterback would be great too. But Ladarius Sneed got tagged. I mean, look at these names. These are, it's no wonder that they're getting tagged. These aren't guys that I think are easy to let go of. And I'll just go down the list of names for our audio listeners here. So these are players who, could have got into free agency, but their respective teams signed them. Ravens interior defensive lineman Justin Matabuke, edge rusher Brian Burns, cornerback Jalen Johnson from the Bears, Emmanuel Mosley. That name may sound familiar to some of you. He re-signed with the Lions. He wasn't franchise tagged. Sorry, he was signed. I don't know why I put him under franchise tag. But Josh Allen, I believe, was tagged as well, and Ladarius Sneed was as well. So, yeah, these are some names I think, me and some other 49er fans would have definitely liked, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at Josh Allen as an option. But I'm kind of scarred because we had some splash signings last year on the defensive line, and so it's like I'm tainted now. I'm not sure. Like, it looks sexy, I buy it, and it just, it's going to sit on my couch. It's not going to do anything.
Wow, sit on the couch, huh? Man, that's
so. I told you it's a wacky
rough.
Wednesday, but no, the meme is perfect. That's literally my face when you brought this up.
Yeah, it's the Michael Scott, I don't know. How would you describe that face? Just like disappointed, upset face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, 49ers will have to make do with the list of names that will actually be free agents, which will include, these players. So as far as some guys who have been released in, the last few days, maybe the last week, that are now free agents, you have Jaguars cornerback Darius Williams. You have, and these two moves that I'm just about to mention, they just happened like an hour or two ago before we recorded here. The Bills released their cornerback Tre'Davious White, and that's a big one. That's a really big one. And then they also released their wide receiver, kick returner Deontay Hardy. The Seahawks yesterday on Tuesday released Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, both safeties. And the Eagles, a little bit before we went live as well, released or plan to release cornerback Avonte Maddox. So these, I mean, to me, these are some intriguing names for the 49ers. Maybe not so much the Seahawks. I just put them in there because they are like key players. And it's relevant to NFC West, but I don't think the 49ers would go after either of Adams or Diggs in free agency. I think they're pretty much set with Ufunga and with Jair Brown. But that's not to say that they won't be interested in bringing in any safeties. I just don't think those particular safeties who probably would look for a starting position would be, the right fit for the 49ers at this time. But all three of these corners, Darius Williams, Tre'Davious White, Avonte Maddox, I mean, they definitely some names that intrigue me.
We'll keep an eye on it. I'm still stuck on D-line. I can't get past it. It's the only thing I watched at the combine. It's the only thing. I'm borderline obsessive about, like, what do we do about this D-line? By the way,
Really?
They didn't call me up to be defensive coordinator. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with this, but so I love defensive football, and I'm just so bummed. And so I don't know. Like, there's just. I have nothing else to say, but fork-tailed devil IP38J. Yes, and I think Mosley is coming off of an ACL repair.
Yes.
And so it's interesting, but it's not uncommon, for he's a veteran, people can come back from an ACL tear and it not be a big deal. But interestingly, I read an article, I have it maybe somewhere up in my open tabs, where they put out that they kind of rated by position, which was the top positions that were out there in free agency. And they put Hunter for a defensive end edge outside linebacker, the one who tore his pec, and he's coming back from that surgery. So that I went down a rabbit hole, guys. So I'm like, pecs, to have a pec repair, what does it look like coming back from that? And I found a study. It's called a systematic review. And what they do in those kind of studies is they take all the studies that are on that topic and they pile all the data together, and then they look through the data and come up with some numbers from it. So the title is Outcomes and Return to Sport After Pectoralis Major Tendon Repair. And again, a systematic review. And what they came back with out of looking at all of that is there was 2,332 retrieved articles. 18 studies were included with a total of 536 patients. So that's a fantastic number considering this is not a very common injury. And so they said a majority of them that undergo this surgery return to sport at a mean of 6 plus or minus almost 2 months, 6 months-ish. And they said 74% successfully returned to their pre-injury level of sport. Pretty good, 74%. I'd love for that to be higher. And they say post-surgically, 81% of patients have a complete pain relief after surgery. But here's the interesting little nugget of data that I thought was interesting here. Of the 10 studies that reported complications, 18% of patients had postoperative complications that included re-ruptures or wound infections, and 7% had to have a reoperation. I don't love those numbers, to be honest with you. So I would have a little bit of concern about, signing him if that's something that they're thinking about. 75% chance. I don't know. Would you buy a truck if 75% chance that it's going to be fine in, 5 years, or depending on the money amount, right? I don't know. It's interesting to think about that. I would hope that he had this incredible surgery and that there's nothing to worry about, but you do have to take into account, what are you looking for when you're trying to sign somebody? Because these are, one, they have experience. And so not everything is going to be what they bring to the team is going to be a physical contribution. But also, are you just looking for someone to get you through that year? Or are you looking for someone to carry you, once you get everything molded, you probably want to keep replicating that for at least a couple of years. So that was just my 2 cents on that.
I like the truck analogy. I think that that really drives the point home. We also have a question from Corey Soto. He asks, what would your reaction be if the Niners signed Cousins? Just curious, what's your reaction? Do you look at the work differently? Are you livid, etc.? Well, I'll just say this. And I don't think they would sign Cousins. But if they did, would I be angry? No, because I think it would show that there's a win with the 49ers. And I think that's pretty obvious, right? But I think they have faith in Brock Purdy, so that's why I think it would be unlikely. But obviously, Kirk Cousins would, I'd take Kirk Cousins right now over Brock Purdy. That's not a knock on Brock Purdy. That just, if money wasn't an issue, right? I would take Cousins over Purdy, just if nothing else. Just from the talent standpoint. So I wouldn't be angry. What about you, Dezi?
I love me some Kirk Cousins. His dance performance at the NFL Honors was 100. I love it. But if you were to bring in somebody like Kirk Cousins, Russ is out there too. I think Russell Wilson, I don't think any of us would want him. He wore a different uniform a while ago that we would never want him to be on our team. But when you talk about quarterbacks that are in this caliber, they come with a price tag. And if you bring that price tag with them, it disrupts everything else that you're trying to do. So we're trying to capitalize on the financial side of this with having Brock Purdy still on his rookie contract. So, essentially, no, I love Kirk Cousins. I think he's fantastic. I love his energy. I love his pureness. I love, what he brings. And I think he fits the culture of the 49ers, but I just don't think it's a logical option at this point because of the financials that come with it.
I think that's the other part of the discussion that, I didn't really cover. I was like, if money wasn't a thing, sure, Cousins, yes, but because money is very much a thing for the 49ers right now, I think I would be livid, actually, because it would require them to then make other moves to make it happen. And does that help their window necessarily? I don't know. I think it's fair to say that maybe the difference between Purdy and Cousins isn't enough to, break the whole team down to make it happen, Right. So yeah, but great question. I love the discussion on Kirk Cousins. I'm actually glad, this is our first off season where Kyle Shanahan, Kirk Cousins thing is not a thing, and I'm so happy about it. But let's get back to some of these free agents. And like I said, like for me, the corners are very intriguing. Maddox, for example, from Philly, he could play inside and outside. I think the 49ers would like to have that kind of versatility because, I mean, they know Lenore can play inside and outside now. Like, that's great to have. But you also want Lenore to play at his best spot. And I don't know what the 49ers think his best spot is. Do they like him better in the slot or do they like him better outside? That will kind of, I think, dictate what corner they bring in either via the draft or free agency. And Deontay Hardy, Ray McLeod is a free agent for the 49ers, this offseason. So I think Deontay Hardy is definitely someone the 49ers can look to. I mean, he is a pretty good return man. And I don't know, Ray, there's some left to be desired there. And so I think the 49ers could definitely upgrade at return man. And Deontay Hardy would probably come, pretty affordable for the team. So I definitely would not be mad at that. Now, Dezi, are you ready to look at some of these names for free agency that the 49ers could potentially be looking at?
I am, but I have one question for you based on what you just said.
Okay.
Does your opinion change if the rules change on the kick return that they're talking about?
Well, for one, I think changing the rule is stupid. So let's start there. But and it's so they're adding so much intricacy to it. It's like it's too much. Someone commented on one of the tweets, explaining the new rule. And they were like, there's no way Kyle Shanahan remembers all of this. And I was like, you know what? That was a good joke. That's a good joke.
Well, now he's got Staley that can help him remember these things. So it's all good.
Yeah. No, from what I do understand of the new rule, no one on the return team, the kicking team can move until the return man has touched the ball, right?
Correct.
Is that it? Yeah.
I think that's it.
I actually think that helps the returners, and a guy like a speedy guy like Hardy, I think that could probably help him. So who knows? I guess I don't really know how that's going to look in the NFL next year or whenever. I assume it's next year they're starting that, and we'll see how that kind of changes the landscape of the return game. But I mean, regardless, I want someone that at least has the possibility of taking it to the house, and they just haven't had that. Like, I believe it was here. I just retweeted it a second ago because Matt Barrows said 49ers haven't had a punt return touchdown since week 1 of 2011.
I was thinking that.
I was at that game. It was Ted Ginn Jr., and I believe he had 3 touchdowns that day, if I'm not mistaken. So it was a wild one. Yeah, ideally, like, you want someone who has that threat. I mean, the 49ers haven't had that, and they've been searching for it, but I guess it's hard to find. It must be because, like, they just for the life of them cannot seem to find an impactful enough return man. But so Hardy would be an option for me. Now,
also,
Dezi,
for those listening, people that can make the change, like, let's stop the talks about adding another game in the season. Just throwing that out there.
That too. But you know what? The NFL is not going to let that go. I mean, unfortunately, all this talk about player safety, right? And they're over here talking about adding games. And for players, I know a lot of players are like, well, we better get a second bye week then.
Yeah,
I'd be totally on board with a second bye week. I mean, I think that if you're going to expand the weeks, having 2 bye weeks, I think protects the product.
Absolutely.
Which is the players and the entertainment value that they bring. You don't want players getting hurt. I mean, that just hurts your product at the end of the day.
Yes.
So keeping them healthy, keeping them fresh, and allowing them to get 2 bye weeks, I think would help the NFL in that regard. But we'll see what happens there. Now, let's start off looking at some offensive tackles. So these are the free agent offensive tackles. And the order in which they appear is more or less, I guess, just, the top guys are listed towards the top, and lesser known guys are just, guys that aren't as good or towards the bottom, more or less. So we got Tyron Smith from Cowboys at the top. He was released, I believe it was like a week ago at this point, or maybe two. Then you have Charles Leno Jr. out of Washington. And then you have Michael Onwenu from the Patriots. Those are like the big three right now. Or out of those three names, like, who do you like the most for the 49ers?
None of them.
Okay.
I did look at this list and I was just like, nothing. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, it's not.
Okay, so let me ask you this. I could see the reasoning, I guess, for the other guys, but what about Michael Onwenu from the Patriots? What is it about him that you're like, this might not be the guy?
I just, to be fair, I probably didn't watch enough of the games to be able to come out and just say definitively a yes or a no. I don't know. I'm just not. Just look at the teams that are listed up there. I just feel like offensively, like, what did they do? Like, that they were so impactful that it made a difference, right? Like, I mean, I guess Dak wasn't on his back as much this past year as he's been in years past, but I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like something that I think is worthwhile. I mean, again, we traded away Mike McGlinchey, which I think is a decent, he's mediocre, right? Maybe mid is what, you're thinking, but is that really what we want to bring back in, or do we want to roll the dice? I mean, I hate to put this out there. I mean, I think we make smart enough decisions, and we've already been able to get through multiple seasons without a stellar right tackle. So, like, let's try to get the right fit, because again, I'm low key got some anxiety about what we do about Trent Williams. So we really need to draft the guy this year, guys. I'm so serious. We need a very stellar right tackle to start at right tackle and eventually learn from the best Hall of Famer, the Silverback, so that, God forbid, when he finally rolls out, we've now fostered that, really, fostered somebody from right to left and can just be locked and loaded. So that's why I don't even want to look at these names. Like, that has got to be priority number one. We have got to find that. And I know that person isn't on this list, in my opinion.
So that's fair. Like, okay, so as far as tackle goes and how the 49ers can tackle it, I think, obviously to me, there's one name from these top three that is a real option, and that, to me, is Onwenu. And the reason is because he is a right tackle. Tyron Smith has played right tackle early on in his career, but I think, he's mostly been a left tackle. He's up there in age, so really you'd probably have him for 1-2 years. And he has an injury history, that goes pretty far back. So Tyron Smith, probably, I don't think I'd take that risk. Charles Leno Jr., he's pretty good, but he's also a left tackle, which the 49ers don't need right now, right? So probably better to look at Trent Williams replacements in the draft. But if you want to upgrade at right tackle and have someone compete with Colton McKivitz, I think Michael Onwenu is, the guy for the 49ers to target. And I was just looking at Spotrac to see what his market value is, and they have him at 13.6 million average annual salaries, kind of like what they project for him. I mean, could the 49ers afford that? I don't know. Let's just assume like the 49ers have one splash signing they could afford this offseason to make it happen. I would not be mad if it was Owenu, and he's pretty young too. Like he's only 26. So I would like that. That'd be a pretty long-term answer at right tackle for this team. So I wouldn't be mad at it. And as 49er Media points out, he can also play guard. So yes, if he absolutely needed to.
Yeah, he was drafted as guard by New England back in 2020. 6th-round draft pick out of Michigan. He's 6'3", 350 is what he's listed as. So I mean, I wouldn't be mad either, I guess, but I'm just so obsessed. I
mean, they could do both, right? Like they could get one of those top 3 guys, and they could still draft the tackle because the need for the Trent Williams replacement would still be a need. Yeah. We're just talking about, I guess, like someone who could compete for right tackle right away.
I guess it just comes down to money. How much is he making right now? Or what was he making?
I don't know how much he was making. Well, I mean, that was probably his rookie contract he was on. But, like I said, Spotrac has him projected for a $13.6 million average annual salary. Yeah. And, okay, so here's what's going to happen, Dezi, is on Monday, I'm going to do my show with Weston, and we're going to have Jason Hurley, who is the 49ers cap guru, on our podcast. And basically, me and you today, we're gonna what is it? We're gonna what is that saying about checks? We're gonna write the check, and on Monday we're gonna find out if 49ers can afford to cash it. How about that?
There you go. I like that.
So we'll say the names, the blue sky names that we want for this 49ers team, and then Monday we're gonna have our dreams crushed. So yes. that's how it's gonna go.
We'll have Michael Scott faces.
Yeah, exactly. More of those memes. 49er Media says, I didn't know Justin School was on the Bucks. He sure was. But he's going to be a free agent. So I don't know. Maybe there could be a reunion there. But I don't see School as anything more than, depth for this team, which I think at the tackle spot, they probably have a decent amount of depth there. Let's look at the next. Please no. Let's look at the next set here. So edge rusher, Dezi, you said you're obsessed with the defensive line. Lucky for you, the 49ers are as well. And so I do expect them to, probably be in the edge rusher market this free agency period. We were talking about, Chase Young. He's one of the guys who is going to enter free agency. The reports are that the 49ers would be open to bringing him back. I think that that's all, conditional, right? Based on what his value out there will be like, and if they're, comfortable with paying that amount. So I guess we'll find out. But let's not talk about Chase Young here. Let's look at some of these other names. And we were talking about Danielle Hunter from Vikings, and you mentioned like he's dealing with an injury, right? He's coming back from an injury, but he is expected to be one of the top names out of the pass rusher market this go around. Also, Andrew Van Ginkel from the Dolphins, Jadeveon Clowney from Ravens, Zadarius Smith from the Browns. Those are kind of like the top guys, and I'll just mention Shaquille Barrett as well. I think is kind of intriguing to me, as well as Kyle Van Noy. And I know other people have mentioned Bryce Huff from the Jets. So those are some nice names to me. I think there's definitely some options for the 49ers here.
Absolutely. I agree. Again, still have some concerns about Daniel Hunter with the return from the pec injury. But I mean, again, and I'm still scarred from last year. Like, do we roll that dice? And then we've also been a team with, luckily last year, we were doing very well with not having a lot of injuries, knock on wood. But we also have had that part of, that problem with injuries, and I just hate to bring somebody in and have it be a situation where that brings them down. I did watch a lot of Clowney this year. My husband is a Baltimore Ravens fan, so I did watch a lot of him. He does not look like the Clowney of years past, right? Because we've all seen him in his heyday, and he was very explosive, and he was always a problem for us. He wasn't. I could just see the difference. The aging is there, so I'm not super confident on Clowney. I do agree that I think Kyle Van Noy could be interesting. And I don't know. Like, to me, it's Chase Young. I don't want to I'm going to trust the 49ers. Let me say that. I'm going to fully and wholeheartedly trust the 49ers on what they do with Chase Young. And I think it's going to be telling whether he stays, and it's going to be telling whether he goes. Because I do think this is probably the best place that he could possibly be. Like, he lucked out with being able to be with Nick Bosa and being with the incredible coaches that we have. Was Wilkes a true factor in everything? Maybe not. I'm not sure. But I mean, if you look at this list and you put aside anything like outside of just the physical, I mean, we're in a good situation having him, but that's not what's in question, right? So do you take someone like him, or do you take someone like Daniel Hunter, who's coming back from an injury that also you don't know what what that's going to shake out to look like? So I don't know. I haven't put the puzzle piece together yet, but I did look at this list, and that's kind of where I am with it at this point.
Yeah, and we have a question from Technic Chic. Says, would the injury bring Hunter's price point down potentially? Desi made that truck analogy and discussed at what cost, but lots of other names too.
So, I mean, that's kind of why I brought the truck analogy, right? Because if you're buying a truck right off the lot, you have expectations with that, right? Like, you're going to pay premium dollar. It's nothing's wrong with it. It's coming right off the lot. If you buy something that's a 2021 that, maybe it's had some harsh love, maybe not, maybe it's had, this or that done to it. Like, who determines what that fair market price is, right? Like, or is it 10% off? Is it 20% off? Like, it's still going to drive you around, but maybe you're not going to, have as much faith into it. It's only going to last you X amount of years. What value is that to you right now? Like, are you someone that works a job in construction that needs a truck like that, and right now it fits the bill, and that's what you're going to go for, and that's where you're going to put your money? Or are you someone that's like, you know what, I don't necessarily need that. I'm not going to be 4x4ing and live in Buffalo where I need to have the that special the all-wheel drive situation. So that's what, and I'm not sure that I can answer that, other than I think it should matter, right? I think that is a bargaining chip when you say, hey, this guy's coming back from a big pec repair. Like, we're not sure what that's going to look like. I mean, this is your edge rusher. If he can't wrap up and he can't, use that muscle, or there's a fear there, or even say it is fine. The other part of that we're not sure is, how's that going to handle mentally, coming back from injuries. Sometimes there's just fear, and the athlete then performs differently because whether it's consciously or subconsciously, they're playing a little bit different. So there's a lot of things to kind of tease out with that. And I would say, prior to that injury, I don't even think Minnesota would let him go, but maybe that's part of the reason why he's floating out there too. So
yeah, I mean, free agency is definitely going to set his market, and I'm sure it'll take the injury into consideration for some of those teams. So maybe that's why the Vikings do want to kind of wait and see what that is before they go out and make an offer. Spotrac has his projected annual salary at $20 million. So that's what they would project him. They project 3 years, $60 million contract. So, I mean, that's pretty big. And given the risks that you kind of outlined, I don't know, maybe I'd have the 49ers. I'd prefer the 49ers to not take that risk and have another team, take that risk. I think there's other names on here that would be a little more intriguing to me. And, I don't know. Maybe I am warming up to the idea of Chase Young potentially coming back. Kiwi Ramen says if Chase Young gets re-signed, I will love it. I think it'll help in the long run for him and us. He'll get better and be a 15-sack guy. Hot take of the day for me. Definitely a hot take there, 15-sack guy. But, I mean, hey, if that's what we might get with Chase Young next season, sign me up, right? Like, yeah, I would
exactly.
take that. I guess, like, Young's value, there's no way that it's high right now. Like I don't know. I just don't see that happening. I guess we'll see. Let me look up what Spotrac projects him to be at really
Yeah, that's
quickly.
exactly what I was getting ready to ask you is what does it look like for
So they project a 1-year $13 million deal for Chase Young. Not too bad, but with that kind of money, it's like you better you have to be the starter, and you better be like a pretty decent one, right? Like if you're gonna be starting next to Nick Bosa, like you know I don't know. So we'll see. Look, I do think the 49ers probably end up signing two guys on this list as far as free agents go. Maybe one will hear around the start of free agency, maybe one a little bit later, like closer to training camp. Like that wouldn't surprise me. But the 49ers are losing, in addition to Chase Young, there's going to be two other free agents, edge rushers, Clinton Farrell, and then also Randy Gregory. I would be open to Clinton Farrell coming back. No one's talking about that, but I know he ended the season with an injury as well, Dezi. Like, I don't even remember what that injury was, but I know it kept him out because it was towards the end of the season. There's no concerns about him from that standpoint, right? And that impacting, the start
Yeah,
of his season or off season.
it was a knee injury, and I'm not sure that we had the specific details on that, but I do know that they said it was not the ACL. So, I mean, I agree, Steph. And I actually, whenever I see Cleveland Farrell's name, I think of you. I'm like, I know Steph likes this guy. So I expected you fully to say that you were okay with him coming back. I would have to agree. I think that, it could be a situation much like, let's talk about Eric Armstead. He's missed massive time the last 2 years. And, now it comes out that he ended up having a knee surgery as well. I think cleaning up some meniscus in there is what I recall. And if this is the same case for Cleveland Farrell, I'm here for it because people can bounce back from those surgeries feeling a lot better. And so, yeah, no ligamentous injury. Let's go.
I would be a huge fan of that, maybe even more so than bringing Chase Young back personally. Like, I just thought Clinton Farrell got better as the season went on. And, earlier we were kind of joking around about the defensive line maybe having a bit of the Steve Wilkes syndrome last season. And so maybe as a whole, they kind of perform better this year, including Clinton Farrell if they bring him back. So that's a gamble, which I don't, it's not a big gamble, but that's one I'd be willing to make. And hopefully the 49ers are too. Let's keep it moving here. Cornerback, I think, is the other, position that I expect the 49ers to want to target in free agency. The question is, how big do they want to go with cornerback, right? They already got Mooney Ward. They already got Lenore. And so really you're either bringing an outside guy and you want to move Lenore into the slot full time, or, maybe you want just fully a slot corner, or you have a guy who can do both and it gives you the flexibility to kind of figure it out going into training camp and all that. So that's kind of, the interesting decision I think the 49ers have to make. But I think like the 49ers can bring someone in that's good and doesn't necessarily have to break the bank when it comes to these corners. I think that's what I like about the group. And, we mentioned some of the names early on that I don't think are on this list, but like Dezi, the names that I mentioned here were way more intriguing to me than what we had. So like Darius Williams, Tre'Davious White, Avonte Maddox, those are names I would definitely entertain. And so I'll just mention that before talking about any of these corners here, but some names I think the 49ers could potentially entertain as well.
Yeah, I think it comes down to money. There's definitely some bigger names on here. Gilmore is what stood out to me, and even though I don't like getting products from Dallas, but I mean, I thought that was an interesting one. I don't know what other things are popping out to you.
We've got Akella Witherspoon, former Niner, and you see him pretty high up here. He was most recently with the Rams, going to be a free agent. That's crazy. That's crazy to me that Witherspoon is so high, I guess, on the list. But he did turn some things around. Like, he looks a lot better, but I don't know. I would be a little wary of that just because of the history that he had with the 49ers. Kenny Moore is a name I hear a lot of people mentioning for the 49ers. He's the corner out of the Colts. And so here, let's see if I can pull up PFF numbers really quick. But that could be an option for them. But I don't know. I think they go. I'd be surprised if they went big money with a corner. I don't know why. I don't think they necessarily need it. I think more so they probably want to shore up their depth. That was, I think, a huge issue for them last season. Just the fact that they were so close to having Ambry Thomas, have to go out there and play meaningful snaps, right? They were lucky, I think, that it didn't really ever come to that, but that was kind of the risk they took, and maybe they realized they were flying a little too close to the sun. But yeah, Kenny Moore would be an interesting one, and yeah, I'd have to do a little more.
Nelson's been productive for for Houston. I like that name as well.
Yeah,
4
for
interceptions
sure.
last year.
Kiwi says he likes Bunting from the Titans. Sean Murphy Bunting. Yeah, Foxtail agrees. Bunting's a good option. So, yeah, the 49ers definitely going to have some options when it comes to free agency. We've got like other groups as well. Look, I don't want to go into the names for these next ones because I don't think they're as big a need for the 49ers. But here's what I'll say about safety. Is I don't think they're going to go big money shopping for a safety because, like I mentioned earlier, like they clearly like Hufanga. They clearly like Jair Brown. I think they're going to stick with that. I think if you look at some of who they've visited with so far through the draft process, it hasn't been like early safeties. Like they'll probably bring in a rookie safety for depth, a guy who they could potentially develop into something maybe. But I think for safety, they're looking at depth. So I don't think they're going to be making any big money moves when it comes to safety. I think that's totally okay. I think there's going to be some names that are fine. Veterans, maybe is something that I think they'll look to bring in, especially because you have Jair Brown, a really young player, and Hufanga, who, I think Hufanga really benefited from having a veteran like Sean Gibson, to play next to. So I think having a veteran in the room is important.
So Sean Gibson is on the list.
He is on the list. I mean, he hasn't announced his retirement or anything, but yeah. I guess, I don't know. He was still playing at a well enough level that, I mean, they could bring him back on a 1-year deal, potentially. Cam Curl is an interesting one. He was from Washington, I believe. Yeah, I realized I cut off the team name, but Cam Curl, I believe, was cut not too long ago. Peter's making some moves over there, but yeah, there's options. Yeah, and yeah, the Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs were cut by, the Seahawks. But yeah, I don't think the 49ers would be interested in either of those guys. As far as linebackers go, like, that's an interesting one just because, we've talked about Greenlaw. But what that also complicates it a bit because Greenlaw's not going to be out forever. And we would expect Greenlaw would come back at some point in the season, right? Like that's kind of the optimism around it. And so whoever they sign, like I know a lot of people have mentioned Aziz, right? Like
I love Aziz. I love that.
We love Aziz, but like, would he come back knowing that once Greenlaw's back, he's relegated back to LB3? You know, like that's kind of the question I have for anyone that would come in. It would kind of just be a guy who's good enough to start, you know, and be the LB2, and a guy who is good enough to start, but also would be fine with then being, you know, get down on the depth chart once Greenlaw's back. Like that's a unique position, and it'll take I think a middle of the pack kind of linebacker on this list. Quan Alexander's an interesting one. I mean, there could be a reunion there. He's at the later end of his career.
The one that we're all drooling over is Patrick Queen, right? Like,
oh yeah.
If we're talking about possibly like depending on what's happening with Dre, I mean, this is like just reconfiguring the Avengers, right? Like you're just plugging one in for the other. But, you know, to your point of what you said earlier about Aziz is like, all right, so what happens when Dre comes back? Like, you know, that's not, and like, I don't know. I don't want to talk about that either, because I love our tandem that we have now, and it still hurts my heart every time I think about the damn Super Bowl. Just my heart just explodes all over again whenever I think about his injury. So, but we have to be realistic and understand that this is a really tough injury to come back from. And you know, we don't, again, every time you have an injury like this, what player are we getting back after that? You know, he's someone that just throws his body around. Is he still going to be that same player in that same gritty way when he comes back?
Yeah, exactly. 49er Media says, I personally don't think we need linebacker. I trust in Winters and Graham. Yeah, D. Winters, Jalen Graham, who the 49ers drafted last offseason. You know, could they make a second-year leap, right? I mean, that's definitely the hope. We've seen the 49ers bank on a player making a second-year leap before. Hasn't quite worked out. You know, Drake Jackson being the most recent example. But, yeah, I mean, I think for linebacker, I think they bring in a veteran. I think they bring in someone who has been there before and not really like a rising player, because a rising player definitely wants to start somewhere and not have his starting position cut short in mid-season when Greenlaw comes back. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do there. But, yeah, this is the last one, I believe, just interior defensive lineman. I don't think they need to do a whole lot. The only guy that the 49ers are really – well, okay, there's two guys on the interior, the guy that the 49ers are losing, Kinlaw, who was actually pretty great, you know, this past season, and Kevin Givens. Givens, you know, didn't do a whole lot. He was returning to this team, his second stint. And, you know, Kinlaw looked good. So, Sebastian Joseph Day, who they traded for mid-season as well. Or, I forget if he was a trade or just free agent signing. But, yeah, I mean, so three guys on the interior, definitely going to need some depth. Again, I think they go with some bets here. Bring some experience in. Maurice Hurst, who, you know, formerly with the 49ers, name they can look to bring back. Potentially, he was just with the Browns this past season. But yeah, not a huge need, but also just one of those, like, you know, kind of a big need.
Yeah. No, and I still have concerns about even Eric Armstead, 2 years missing a lot of time. So he's getting banged up. He's getting older. Just something to think about when we say we don't necessarily need him, but he makes that much of a difference when he does come out. And I can't believe how much pain he played through, you know, in the postseason, knowing his knee was that jacked up. So this has me a little concerned. And if I'm looking at comments, Kiwi, you actually said exactly what I was thinking. But again, to Steph's point, is like, I don't think he wants to come back as, if when we get Dre Greenlaw back, he's not going to take a back seat. But I mean, I couldn't agree with this more. Like, this is a tough call here for me. As far as, the defensive line, I just, we're getting banged up, and there's just something, we need something to, besides Nick Bosa as a solid, someone that we can rely on to be there. Like, I just feel like Nick is the only one that's been all the way through. And now, again, I hope that Eric Armstead with his injury, with his surgery, is going to be all that we know him to be. But we've got to start really looking at this D line. Like, there's just so much work that has to be done. And I'm not sure what the answers are here. I mean, do you make that big of a splash play for Chris Jones? Or like, do we want to try another player from Philadelphia and Fletcher Cox? I don't know. But this is just going to be an interesting recipe that they put together. And I agree that Kinlaw was looking better as the season went on. And, I was someone that had concern about his knees and wondering how long his longevity would be, because of all the issues that he's had before. But he showed such great promise. And I'm here for it, knowing that, again, he's probably someone that's just pushed through so much pain and injury and things like that. And he really started to shine. So I would have kind of loved to see what maybe another year would have looked like, but I'm not sure.
A year ago, I would have called myself crazy for even considering the idea of bringing back Javon Kinlaw. And today, I'm like, I would be open to bringing back Javon Kinlaw just based on this past season. I think, for me, I'm optimistic that he turned a corner. I don't know if the 49ers feel that way, but we remember Eric Armstead beginning his career he dealt with a lot of injuries as well, and kind of, came to a point where he got through that. Now that he's a little bit older, injuries are kind of starting to make a return for him. But, maybe for Kinlaw, the knee thing is potentially behind him, and maybe he's learned how to, deal with it. I know he shed a lot of weight, and that has seemed to help him. So I don't know. I'd be open to bringing Kinlaw back. I'm curious what his market is going to look like. I guess it wouldn't surprise me if, a team like the Texans wanted to take a flyer on him, just especially because seeing how he performed this past season, it was kind of like what the 49ers hoped he would be, right? Spotrac has Kinlaw's projected value at $5.4 million average salary. They project him getting a 2-year, $10.8 million deal. That's not too bad. So we'll see. We'll see what the 49ers do. I mean, it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. I'm curious also to see if the 49ers make any moves, and as far as like restructures go, or maybe someone taking a pay cut, in the coming days before free agency begins on Monday. I don't think it begins Monday. I'm sorry. It begins the 13th. So in a week. So a lot's going to happen between now and then, as far as additional players that'll probably get cut. So exciting times. But Dezi, thank you so much for joining me today and talking about all these great players. It's an exciting time for the 49ers and everyone in the comments as well. You guys had, tampering begins Monday. There you go. So 49er Media with the clutch comment there at the 11th hour. Make sure you guys like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. We'll be back, doing some interviews throughout the week, but be back on Monday with Weston as well. So make sure you guys tune into that. But for now, have a good rest of your Wednesday, folks. Peace.